Chapter 1. The Boy the Spire Forgot. Everyone in Thistlebrook Hollow agreed on exactly one thing about Awakening Day. You did not want to go last. Naturally, I went last. Not because the universe hates me specifically, though by the end of this chapter you're allowed to start suspecting that, but because the Spire calls children up by birth order within the month, and I had the audacity to be born on the 30th. Which meant I got to spend 4 hours watching 26 of my classmates become legends while I sat on a hay bale, slowly losing the feeling in my legs. Pim Hadley went up first and got Pim Hadley, Frost Duelist, uncommon rank, which made his mother cry the good kind of tears and made my mother grip my hand a little tighter, like she was already rehearsing for something. Bertie Crane got Storm Warden, common rank, which is the magical equivalent of being told you have a face for radio, but everyone clapped anyway because that's the rule. Sasha Vielle. And I want you to understand, I had been quietly, hopelessly in love with Sasha Vielle since we were 7, and she once shared her lunch with me without making it weird. Stepped onto the glyph, and the whole spire lit up gold like the sun had personally decided to get involved. And the light letters over her head spelled out Sasha Vale, Radiant Cleric, Rare Rank, and the entire town made a sound like a single enormous animal being pleasantly surprised. I clapped so hard I think I sprained something. I was thrilled for her. I was also doing rapid mental math on how many ranks below rare a boy would need to be before lunch sharing officially became completely unthinkable. And the number I landed on was conservatively all of them. By the time they called my name, the sun was going down, half the crowd had started on the meat pies, and I had successfully chewed through both my own confidence and most of a thumbnail. Arlo Penwick, said Magistrate Farrow in the tired voice of a man checking the last item off a very long list. I want to be clear that I walked up there with my chin high and my shoulders back, the way my dad taught me, the way every story says you're supposed to walk into your destiny. I tripped on the second step, caught myself, recovered with what I like to remember as wounded gazelle grace, and what witnesses later described unhelpfully as like a sack of turnips that had personally insulted gravity. Either way, I made it to the glyph. I stood on the glyph. I closed my eyes because everyone else closed their eyes, and I figured that was part of the ritual and not just everyone else being better at this than me. Nothing happened. I want to walk you through nothing happening because it happened slowly, and slow-motion catastrophe is somehow worse than the fast kind. First, silence. The good kind. The kind right before something wonderful. The kind I'd heard all afternoon, a half-second before. Gold light or blue light or one memorable case of a boy named Tobble getting affinity. Compost? Common rank. And bursting into proud tears anyway because a rank's a rank. Then, more silence. The kind that starts curdling. Then, a cough, from somewhere near the meat pies. Then, Magistrate Farrow very quietly to his assistant. Is the glyph broken? The glyph was not broken. I knew this with total certainty because I could feel it working. A strange tug behind my sternum, like something enormous on the other end of a very thin string, trying to figure out what to do with me. Then the light came. Not gold, like Sasha's. Not blue, not silver, not even the dull workman-like brown that Tobble got for his compost affinity. A thin, grayish, almost apologetic light, the color of dishwater, crawled up out of the glyph and hung in the air above my head, and out of it, letter by letter, in front of the entire town came the words, Arlo Penwick, Hollow Rank. I heard someone's mother gasp like she'd touched something cold. I should explain, for anyone lucky enough not to know. Hollow rank isn't nothing. Nothing would almost have been better. Nothing is a mystery, and mysteries get follow-up questions. Hollow rank is a known thing. It happens on average to about one child in a generation, somewhere in the realm, and everyone has heard of it the way everyone has heard of a particular unlucky kind of weather. It means the spire found you, measured you, and concluded, formally, in writing, that you had less magical aptitude than the average turnip. There is no affinity at hollow rank. There is no class. There was just the word, hanging there, doing its small, devastating job. 300 people looked at me with the specific pity reserved for the one in a generation. Sasha, sweet, golden, rare rank Sasha, looked like she wanted to say something kind, which somehow made it worse. What none of them saw, what nobody in that entire crowd would ever see, not that day and not for a long time after, was the other thing that happened at exactly the same moment, in a place none of their eyes could reach. Because while Magistrate Pharaoh was clearing his throat to make the hollow rank official, and while my mother's hand was tightening around mine, something else opened up directly in front of my face, visible, as far as I could tell, only to me. A small rectangular panel, gray-blue, humming faintly like it was thinking very hard about something, covered top to bottom in tight, sharp little marks I had never seen in my life. Not old builder's script, which at least had the decency to look ancient and important. This looked new, recent, almost rude. I looked left. My mother wasn't looking at it. I looked at Pim. Pim wasn't looking at it either. Pim was looking at me, with the specific tenderness you save for a friend who's just been publicly declared less magical than a turnip. Nobody else could see it at all. "Can you read it?" my mother asked, mistaking my staring for shock at my own rank, which, to be fair, was also happening, just not for the reason she thought. I looked back at the panel. The mark sat there, glowing faintly, smug in a way that text really should not be capable of being. "No," I admitted, which was true on two separate levels she had no idea she was asking about. Somewhere in the crowd, somebody's cow chose that exact moment to make a long, low, deeply unimpressed noise, and I have never in my life related to an animal more. They didn't cancel the festival. Velmaran small towns do not cancel festivals. We have buried entire harvests under festivals before, and we will do it again. But the energy changed. The way it changes when a wedding speech goes on 4 minutes too long and everyone starts looking at the cake instead of the bride. I sat back down on my hay bale. The little gray panel, because apparently it just came with me now, hovering a polite foot above my head like the world's worst hat, seen by absolutely no one but me, drifted along obediently and resumed its quiet, smug humming. Pim sat down next to me first, because Pim has been my best friend since we were both small enough to fit in the same washtub, and some loyalties survive even public magical humiliation. "So," Pim said, very carefully in the voice people use around something fragile. "Frost Duelist, uncommon here. You got hollow." "I prefer to think of it as a rank the Spire hasn't invented a good name for yet," I said. "Something exclusive. Limited release. You'll all be jealous in 10 years. You cried during the silence part. That was emotion. That's a human affinity. Extremely rare." He laughed. A real laugh, which helped more than he'll ever know. And that's the part of this story I want you to hold on to, before everything gets significantly stranger. For one whole evening, the worst thing that had happened to me was a panel of unreadable text and 300 witnesses to my failure. I genuinely thought that was going to be the worst part. I had, it turns out, an absolutely staggering amount left to learn about how wrong I could be. Above my head, unnoticed by everyone still finishing their meat pies, the little gray panel flickered once, like it was clearing its throat, and quietly rearranged itself into something new. I wouldn't find out what it said for another 6 hours, several panics, and one extremely ill-advised attempt to shake it off me like a wasp. Chapter 2. The worst possible way to become the luckiest person alive. Here is a piece of advice nobody gives you about public humiliation. It follows you home. I had hoped, vaguely, that walking the half-mile back from the spire in the dark would shake something loose. That somewhere between the festival grounds and our front door, I'd outrun the words hollow rank the way you outrun a wasp, by making enough sudden, undignified turns. This did not work. Hollow rank does not care about your cardio. Hollow rank moves in with you. My mother kept up a steady stream of comfort the entire walk. Plenty of fine people never awakened anything. Your great-aunt Wenna ran the whole eastern orchard on pure stubbornness. And my father, who is not a man of many words, put one hand on my shoulder approximately every 40 steps like he was checking I hadn't quietly dissolved. This, I want to be clear, is an extremely strange thing to discover about yourself on the same day you've already been told you have the magical aptitude of a root vegetable. It's a lot of bad news to process in one evening. I decided, with the calm, measured wisdom of a boy who is absolutely not calm or measured, that the correct response was to wait until I was alone and then have a complete breakdown about it in private, like a civilized person. I got my chance approximately 4 minutes later in the outhouse, which is not where I would have chosen to have the most important moment of my life. But the universe was not consulting me on scheduling. The panel was waiting for me. Of course it was. It had nowhere else to be. It had changed since the spire. No longer just my name and that horrible word, but a whole little block of text, dense and sharp-edged, hovering patiently at eye level like it had all the time in the world, which, given that it had apparently been waiting for me since before I was born, it probably did. I stared at it. It stared back, in the sense that text can stare, which is to say it just sat there being smug. "I can't read you," I told it out loud in an outhouse at night, which is a sentence I never expected to say and sincerely hope never to say again. The panel flickered. And I want you to understand that nothing in my entire life had prepared me for this. Not one single solitary thing. A small separate strip of text peeled itself off the bottom of the panel, and underneath the unreadable marks in handwriting I could understand, in my own actual language, it said, "Translation available after sufficient exposure. Estimated comprehension, 0%. I would like to take a moment to appreciate that the very first thing my mysterious, invisible, possibly world-altering power chose to tell me, clearly, plainly, in words I understood, was that I was bad at it. "Wonderful," I said. "Incredible start. Truly the best possible first impression." The panel did not apologize. The panel, I would come to learn over the following weeks, never apologizes. The panel simply waited, with the serene patience of something that has never once in its existence felt the crushing weight of social embarrassment, while I sat in an outhouse arguing with a piece of light. I reached out, slowly, the way you'd reach toward something that might be a very polite wasp, and touched it. It did not bite me. It did not explode. It did, however, make a small sound like a single plucked harp string, and beneath the 0% line, a second strip of readable text appeared. New title acquired, first contact. "A title," I said. "I have a title now. I am Arlo Penwick, hollow rank, first contact. They're going to put that on my gravestone, and people are going to assume I died doing diplomacy." I laughed. Alone in an outhouse at the literal worst day of my life, I laughed hard enough that I had to sit down on the floor. Because here is a thing I have learned about myself that this entire day confirmed beyond any doubt. When the world hands me a catastrophe, my brain's very first instinct, before fear, before grief, before sense, is to make a joke about it. I have made jokes at funerals. I made a joke about my own magical failure 40 minutes after it happened, alone in a wooden box that smells faintly of last week's cabbage. I am, constitutionally, the kind of person who will find the bit even while drowning, and I have decided, sitting on that floor, half laughing, half crying, entirely covered in straw, that this is either my greatest strength or the thing that's going to get me killed, and possibly both, possibly at the same time, possibly next Tuesday. It took 6 more days for the panel to show me anything that looked even a little bit like good news, and when it finally did, it did not do so gently. I was carrying water, a task so far beneath any kind of magical attention that I genuinely believe the universe forgot I existed for a moment. When my foot caught a root, and I went down hard, and the bucket went one way and I went the other, and for one full second I had the distinct electric thought, this is it. This is the moment I die doing chores. They'll put "fetched water" badly on the headstone next to first contact. And then, instead of hitting the ground, I simply didn't. I hung there, sideways, 4 inches off the dirt. Like the world had reached out and caught me by the collar out of pure professional courtesy. The panel, with what I can only describe as the energy of someone clearing their throat before delivering excellent news, lit up. Passive skill. Triggered absurd fortune, level 1. Effect: fatal or near fatal harm has a chance to be reconsidered. I lowered myself the remaining 4 inches with as much dignity as a boy can summon while hovering sideways over spilled water. And I want it on record that my first reaction was not gratitude, or wonder, or any of the things a sensible protagonist might feel. My first reaction was personal offense. Reconsidered? I said. To nobody. To the empty yard, to the chickens who did not care. I have a rank that means I have less magic than a turnip, and the universe's compromise is a skill that sometimes remembers, I'm not supposed to die yet? This is the discount aisle of destiny. I got the version with a sticker on it. But here's the thing. And I want to be honest with you about this, even though it makes me sound deeply unwell. By the time I'd carried the, now significantly emptier bucket the rest of the way home, I had fully and completely flipped my own opinion, the way I do about most things, roughly every 4 minutes. Because I had just been 4 inches from a face-first introduction to a tree root, and instead I was standing upright, slightly damp and, as far as I could tell, entirely fine. Hollow rank. No affinity. No class. Less magical aptitude than a turnip by official decree in writing, witnessed by 300 people and 1 deeply unimpressed cow. And also apparently the single luckiest person alive, because nothing gets to just decide to kill me anymore without filling out a form first. I'd like to speak to whoever's in charge of this, I told the panel, grinning despite myself, despite the cabbage-smelling outhouse, despite everything. Tell them I have notes, tell them I have several notes, but also, and I need this on the record too, tell them I'll take it. The panel, predictably, did not respond to any of that. It did, however, quietly add 1 more line beneath the others, small enough that I almost missed it, glowing the particular shade of smug that I was already starting to recognize as its shade of smug specifically. Bond level with system 1%. I had absolutely no idea what that meant. I would very shortly wish I had asked more questions before that number started going up. Chapter 3. A boy, a goat, and several crimes against. Dignity. By the end of that first week, I had developed what I can only describe as a system for dealing with. The system, which felt deeply, almost insultingly appropriate. The system was this. Every night, after the lamp was out and my parents had stopped checking on me, every 40 minutes, like I might quietly turn into smoke, I would lie very still, stare directly, upward at absolutely nothing, because the panel hovered exactly where my eyes already pointed, which I have decided is either thoughtful design or a deeply lazy one. And I would say, very quietly, show me. This is not, strictly speaking, a magic word. I want to be clear about that, because for the first 3 nights, I genuinely believed I had discovered a secret incantation. And on the 4th night, I discovered by accident that simply thinking, show me, worked exactly as well. At which point I had to sit with the fact that I'd been whispering theatrically into the dark for 3 nights for absolutely no reason, like a man negotiating with a lamp. The panel obliged anyway. It always obliged. It was, in this one specific way, the single most agreeable thing in my entire life, which is a low bar. But I was setting it myself, and I intended to. Enjoy it. Arlo Penwick. Title: First Contact Rank. Public. Hollow Rank. Actual. Insufficient data level. 1H. P 40/40. M. P. Insufficient data. Skills: Absurd fortune. Level 1. Fatal or near-fatal harm has a chance to be reconsidered. Comprehension. Level 1. 0% to rising. Slowly. Titles. First contact. Bond level with system. 4%. I would like to draw your attention to the line that says, rank, actual, insufficient data, because. I stared at that line for several nights running with the specific dread of a boy who has just realized that the official, public, 300 witness verdict on his entire life might not even be the real number. It might just be the only number the world was capable of measuring, which meant, somewhere underneath, less magical aptitude than a turnip, there might be an entirely different boy that nobody, including me, had met yet. I did not know whether to find this thrilling or deeply, deeply unsettling. I settled, as I tend to, on both simultaneously at full volume, mostly in my own head. The goat happened on a Tuesday. I want to be extremely precise about the goat, because the goat is the reason the entire village stopped pitying me and started, very cautiously, being afraid of me instead. And I think the transition deserves proper documentation. Old Hetty's goat, a genuinely enormous, foul-tempered animal named with admirable village, honesty, disaster, had gotten loose from its pen and taken up a position on the roof of the grain store, which it had apparently climbed via the woodpile, the fence, and what I can only assume was pure spite. Disaster did not want to come down. Disaster made this extremely clear by headbutting. The first 3 people who tried, including Magistrate Pharaoh, who left the encounter with a dignity. Injury significantly worse than the physical one. I was sent up after Disaster for the same reason I get sent to do most things in Thistlebrook Hollow. Now, because a hollow rank boy climbing a roof and getting headbutted off it by an angry goat is, at this point in my life, considered an acceptable use of my time. Nobody was risking Pim's knees. For this, Pim has Frost Duelist knees. Those knees have a future. I climbed up. Disaster looked at me with the calm, unblinking hatred of a creature that has never lost a fight and does not intend to start now. I looked back at Disaster with the calm, unblinking terror of a boy who has read 0 books about goat psychology and is regretting every decision that led him to this roof. Listen, I told it, I have had a difficult week. I have been publicly declared less magical than a root vegetable. I do not have the emotional reserves for you today. Disaster headbutted me directly off the roof. I'd like to walk you through the half second of falling, because it is, to date, the most important half second of my entire life. I saw the ground. I saw, with absolute clarity, the specific rock I was about to introduce my skull to. I had, and I promise you I am not improving this for the story, enough time for one complete, fully formed thought, and the thought was, well, at least, killed by a goat named Disaster is a genuinely excellent line for whatever they put on my grave. And then, I didn't hit the rock. I didn't hit anything. I hung there, 4 feet off the ground, sideways, one arm still extended from where I'd been grabbing uselessly at air while above my head, visible only to me, smug as ever. A familiar little notification bloomed. Absurd fortune, level 1, triggered. Fatal harm, reconsidered. Outcome adjusted. Skill, leveling up, absurd fortune, level 1 to level 2. I lowered gently to the ground like a leaf that had personally insulted gravity. I stood up. I dusted myself off. I turned around to find that approximately 11 villagers, including Old Hetty, including Magistrate Pharaoh, with his still recovering dignity, including Sasha Vael, who had absolutely no reason to be near the grain store but were all staring at me with their mouths open. Because from where they were standing, what they had just witnessed was a hollow rank boy get launched off a roof by an angry goat, hang motionless in midair for 1 full second like the world itself had paused to ask permission, and then float gently down to the ground completely unharmed, looking mildly inconvenienced. I meant to do that, I said, with the serene confidence of a man who absolutely had not meant to do that. Nobody believed me. I could see it in their faces. The exact moment poor hollow rank boy started quietly filing itself under boy we maybe should not make eye contact with. Old Hetty actually took a half step backward, away from me, toward her goat, which tells you everything you need to know about how that day went. Because disaster had injured 3 grown men, and Old Hetty's instinct, watching me float, was to side with the goat. Up on the roof, Disaster made a long, considering noise, looked at me, looked at the 10-foot drop, and, I want this on the official record, witnessed by the same 11 villagers, climbed back down using the fence like a normal animal, as if it too had decided that whatever had just happened to me was not worth testing twice. I have never in my life felt luckier or more thoroughly unemployable, both at the same time, possibly forever. That night, the panel had more for me than usual. New title acquired, Goat Whisperer, unearned. Skill unlocked, improvised aerial recovery, level 1. Comprehension, 6% to rising. Bond level with system, 11%. I stared at Goat Whisperer, unearned, for a long, long time, torn between profound insult and the deep, helpless laughter of a boy who has fully accepted that his life now runs on a sense of humor he did not personally choose. I didn't whisper to anything, I told the ceiling. I screamed a single sentence at a goat and then got headbutted into the sky. The panel did not apologize. The panel, as established, never does. But the number kept climbing. Comprehension, bond level, all of it. Slow and steady. The way water rises in a bucket you've forgotten you left out in the rain. And somewhere underneath the jokes, underneath the bruised pride, and the village's new, careful sideways glances, I noticed something that I was not yet ready to say out loud, even to myself, even alone, even in an outhouse at night. I was starting to look forward to whatever happened next, which, given everything that had happened so far, felt like either the bravest thing I'd ever thought or the single worst decision of my entire life. Chapter 4, The Tutoring Session That Should Not Have Worked. Sasha Vielle knocked on our door 4 days after the goat incident, which I mentioned specifically because in 4 days I had constructed an entire fictional universe in my head in which Sasha Vielle would never knock on our door again, on the grounds that I was now both magically destitute and possibly cursed, and a rare rank Radiant Cleric has better things to do than associate with a known goat-related incident. I would like the record to show that I was wrong, and that I have never in my life been so pleased to be wrong. "My mother heard you floated," she said, standing on our step with the particular brisk cheerfulness of someone who has rehearsed an opening line and is committing to it regardless of how it lands. "Off a roof, past a goat." "The goat was incidental," I said. "I'd like that on the record. The goat did not contribute to the floating. The goat, if anything, actively attempted to prevent any good outcome whatsoever." "Sure," she said, in the tone of someone filing this under things to ask about later. "Can I come in? I want to test something." Here is the part where I tell you that Sasha Vielle, Radiant Cleric, Rare Rank, Golden Light, entire town gasped pleasantly Sasha Vielle had apparently spent 4 days thinking about me. Not in the way I had spent roughly 400 consecutive hours thinking about her, which is its own separate tragedy we don't have time for, but in the focused, clinical way of someone who'd noticed a puzzle and couldn't leave it alone. Radiant Clerics, it turns out, can sense affinity. It's part of the job. You learn to feel out the shape of magic in a person the way a baker learns to feel when dough's ready. And apparently, when she'd stood near me at the grain store, watching me hang sideways in midair like a confused kite, she'd reached out with that sense, the way she'd reach out toward anyone, and felt nothing. "That's the part that's bothering me," she said, sitting cross-legged on our kitchen floor, entirely too comfortable for someone delivering what amounted to a diagnosis. "Hollow rank still has something. It's small, but it's there, like a candle that didn't quite catch. I felt 2 hollow ranks before. My mother took me to bless one as practice. You don't have that. You don't have anything at all. As far as I can tell, sitting right here, you are not radiating one single drop of magic in any direction." "Thank you," I said. "I've worked very hard to be this empty." "I'm serious, Arlo. So am I. It's taken years of dedicated underachievement. She didn't laugh, which is the thing about Sasha I'd somehow never noticed in 7 years of being quietly, hopelessly in love with her. She doesn't laugh at the joke when the joke is covering for something. She just waits. She waited now, hands folded, golden brown eyes doing the thing where they go very still and very patient. And I felt the specific, unique horror of being seen by the one person whose good opinion I had spent the better part of a decade trying to earn through, apparently, comedy and proximity alone. I don't know what's happening to me, I admitted, which cost me more than the goat had. Good, she said. Now we're getting somewhere. Stand up. I want to try something, and if it goes wrong, I want you standing so you have somewhere to fall from, because apparently you're very good at that now. I would like to take a brief moment here to point out that this is, medically speaking, an insane thing to say to someone, and also the single most attractive sentence anyone had ever said to me. And I have decided that those two facts being simultaneously true is simply going to be a recurring feature of my life from now on. And I am choosing, bravely, I think, to make peace with it. What Sasha tried was simple, in the way that the worst ideas are always simple. A small restoration pulse, the kind clerics use to check whether a wound is closing properly, aimed gently at the center of my chest. Harmless. Routine. The magical equivalent of a doctor checking your pulse. The moment it touched me, the panel went berserk. Foreign magic detected. Analyzing. Analysis. Complete. Radiant. Restoration pulse. Rare rank. Non-hostile. Would you like to? 1. Absorb. 2. Mimic. 3. Catalog. 4. Ignore. I made a sound that I would describe generously as a startled goose. What? Said Sasha, hand still extended, light still glowing faintly around her fingers. Was that noise? Nothing. Completely normal noise. I make that noise sometimes. For no reason. I had, by this point, exactly 1.5 weeks of experience with the panel, almost none of it involving decisions with consequences, and certainly none of it involving a glowing list of 4. Options hovering in my vision, while the actual literal source of the magic in question watched me with rapidly narrowing eyes. I did the only sensible thing a boy in my position could do, which is to panic so completely that I selected an option entirely at random, the way you slam a hand on a board game when you've stopped understanding the rules. I hit 2, Mimic. The panel made the harp string sound again, that small, smug little plink I was coming to recognize as its version of a wink. And then, without any further ceremony, without warning, without so much as a polite countdown, a thin ribbon of warm gold light unspooled from somewhere underneath my sternum and wrapped itself once around my hand. Arlo, Sasha said very slowly, the way you'd address a man holding a lit match near a hay barn. Why do you have my light? I have several questions of my own, I said, staring at my own glowing hand with the calm, measured dignity of someone who is internally screaming at a volume that would frighten livestock. Foremost among them being, is this going to come out of my skin in the wash, or is this permanent? New skill acquired, mimicry, level 1. Effect. Upon contact may temporarily replicate a witnessed affinity at a fraction of its source strength. Skill note. Strength of replication tied to comprehension. Current comprehension, 9%. Replication strength, extremely modest. Please manage expectations. I want you to sit with that last line for a moment, the way I had to. My brand new, never before seen, should by all rights be an overpowered cheat. Skill had just been delivered to me along with its own built-in disclaimer, in writing, advising me to manage my expectations. I have been told to manage my expectations by disappointed teachers, disappointed relatives, and on one memorable occasion, an extremely disappointed sheep I'd tried to herd. I had never before been told to manage my expectations by a glowing rectangle of light that exists, as far as I can tell, purely to torment me with my own mediocrity in real time. The gold light around my hand flickered, brightened weakly, and produced, after a full 3 seconds of dramatic buildup, a single modest, almost apologetic spark, roughly the size and ferocity of a struck match. Sasha stared at it. I stared at it. Somewhere outside, a chicken made a noise that I choose to interpret as commentary. That's it, Sasha said. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing, I agreed. I have stolen approximately 4% of your power and used it to produce a sad little light you could get from rubbing a stick the right way. And then, because apparently this is simply how my life works now, because apparently the universe has decided that my comedy and my catastrophe are going to arrive strapped to each other's backs for the foreseeable future. Sasha Vale, rare rank, radiant cleric, future legend, golden girl of Thistlebrook Hollow, looked at my sad, tiny, borrowed spark of light, looked at my face, and laughed so hard she had to put a hand against the kitchen wall to stay upright. You, she said, wiping her eyes, are the single most ridiculous thing that has ever happened to this village, and I include the goat in that statement. I'll take it, I said, and meant it, because 4% of a girl's power, badly used, badly understood, completely uninvited, was still, technically, the single luckiest thing that had ever happened to me. And I had decided, somewhere around the second outhouse breakdown, that I was simply not going to be the kind of person who argues with good fortune over the size of the portion. That night, before sleep, I checked the panel one more time, the way you check a wound to see if it's still there. Bond level with system, 17%. Comprehension, 11% to rising. New title acquired, borrower. Borrower, I told the ceiling, is a much better title than Goat Whisperer, and I'd like to formally request more of these, please, and fewer of the ones that make me sound like livestock. The panel, as ever, declined to respond, but the number kept climbing. They always did. Chapter 5, How to Accidentally Start a Rivalry with Almost No Effort. I would like to introduce you to Corwin Thatch, who I have decided, after careful consideration, is the villain of this section of my life, even though villain is a generous word for a 14-year-old boy whose entire personality is, my father owns the mill. Corwin had awakened 2 years before the rest of us, in the next town over, Brindlewick, a town that considers itself sophisticated because it has 2 bakeries, and had come away with Iron Duelist epic rank, a result so far above anything Thistlebrook Hollow had produced in 3 generations. That Brindlewick families had started sending their sons over specifically so Corwin could be seen near them. The way you'd stand next to a famous horse. Corwin had never spoken to me before the goat incident. After the goat incident, he made a point of finding me. Heard you floated, he said, the way you'd say, heard you were arrested. We were at the market, where I had been sent, once again, to do the chores too dull for anyone with a real affinity, and he had arranged himself against a fence post with the specific, deliberate casualness of a boy who had practiced looking casual in a mirror. Heard the panel doesn't show anyone but you, either. Heard you're a special. I wanted on the record that I had told exactly 4 people about the panel. My parents, Pim, and Sasha. I have a working theory about how the 5th person found out, and the theory's name is Pim, who is an excellent friend. A loyal friend, and constitutionally incapable of keeping a secret for longer than it takes to walk to the market. It's not a panel, I said. It's a curse. I've leaned into the branding. Funny, Corwin said, in the tone of someone who did not find it funny and wanted me to know that specifically. You know what's also funny? Hollow Rank's not supposed to do anything. That's the whole point of Hollow Rank. It's the Spire telling everyone, very clearly, this one doesn't get to play. And here you are, floating, borrowing other people's light, I hear, since apparently you can't make your own. I felt my face do something complicated. Comprehension was up to 14% by then, and apparently so was my ability to recognize, in real time, the precise moment someone has decided to make you their hobby. I don't actually know what I'm doing, I said, honestly, because honesty seemed safer than improvising in front of an audience that had started to gather, the way audiences do whenever 2 boys near the same age stand close together looking tense. I want that understood up front, so that whatever happens next, you know, I went into it with appropriately low expectations. Good, Corwin said. Then it'll be quick. New quest available. Survive Corwin Thatch. Difficulty, comically unfair. Reward, self-respect, partial, experience, possibly a concussion. I would like to file a complaint. I told the panel silently with the specific intensity of a man filing a complaint with a void. About the difficulty rating, about the tone, about all of it. The panel did not respond because the panel never responds. And Corwin had already raised his hand, and a thin, humming blade of compressed iron light had already begun forming along his forearm. And I had, in total, about 1.5 seconds to decide what kind of catastrophe I was about to become. Here's what actually happened, as best I can reconstruct it, given that most of it occurred faster than my own ability to narrate it to myself, which has never previously been a problem, because I narrate everything, including this. Corwin swung. Not at my head. Epic rank or not, he was 14 and showing off for an audience, not actually trying to end me, but close enough to make a point. A controlled arc meant to knock me down and make me look exactly as foolish as everyone already suspected I was. Absurd fortune, level 2. Triggered. Fatal harm reconsidered. Non-fatal harm, also reconsidered. Apparently, we're feeling generous today. Note: this skill was not designed for showing off. Please stop using it to show off. I ducked. I want to be extremely clear that I did not decide to duck. My knees simply stopped supporting weight at the correct moment, with the timing so precise it felt less like reflexes and more like someone backstage adjusting my marionette strings. And Corwin's blade passed cleanly through the space where my head had been standing a half second before. And the momentum he'd built up for a confident, showy strike carried him half a step forward, off balance, directly into the path of my own arm, which I had raised, badly, mostly to protect my face, and which connected with the side of his jaw with all the grace and intention of a man swatting a fly and somehow winning a boxing match by accident. Corwin Thatch, Iron Duelist, Epic rank, Pride of Brindlewick, sat down in the dirt. There was a silence of the kind I was becoming an expert in. The market silence. The silence where everyone is doing very fast math about what they just saw and arriving at answers that don't fit together. I want it understood, I said, into that silence, holding my own throbbing hand against my chest like an injured bird. That I did not do that on purpose, in the sense that on purpose implies any planning whatsoever, and that if you ask me to repeat it, I will almost certainly fail, possibly while crying. Corwin looked up at me from the dirt with an expression I would spend a long time trying to name later, and eventually settled on. The specific horror of a boy realizing that the universe has just publicly humiliated him using someone it apparently considers a joke.
Quest complete. Survive Corwin Thatch. Reward self-respect parshquired. Bonus objective complete. Win without trying. Reward title Glass Cannon's Nightmare. Experience gain level 1, level 2. Bond level with system 23%. Glass Cannon's Nightmare, I repeated, mostly to myself, mostly in disbelief. I would like it on the record that I am 5 feet 4 inches tall and recently cried in an outhouse over a goat. The panel, predictably, declined to amend the title. Corwin did not speak to me again that day. He gathered himself up, dusted off his epic rank dignity as best he could, and left the market with the stiff, careful walk of someone who is extremely aware that people are still looking at him and trying very hard not to acknowledge it. Pim found me afterward, vibrating with the particular energy of a best friend who has just watched something happen that he is going to be telling people about for the rest of his natural life. "You punched Corwin Thatch," he said. I flailed in the general direction of Corwin Thatch's face, and physics did the rest. There's a difference. I want the difference preserved in whatever story you're about to go tell everyone. You're never going to live this down. Pim, I said, with the weary, hard-won wisdom of a boy who had, in the last 2 weeks alone, been declared magically worthless in front of 300 people, floated off a roof past an angry goat, stolen 4% of a girl's light to produce a spark you could get from rubbing 2 sticks together, and now apparently flattened the most magically gifted boy in 2 villages by accident. I have stopped trying to live anything down. I have decided instead to simply collect it. Like a hobby. He laughed. I laughed. Somewhere behind us, Corwin's audience was already retelling the story to people who hadn't been there. And with every retelling, I noticed the story got a little less about luck and a little more about me, specifically on purpose, doing something extraordinary. I did not correct them. I want that on the record too. I had every opportunity in that first week to stand in the middle of the market and explain, honestly, that I am a boy with no magic of my own, a glowing rectangle only I can see, and a skill that appears to function entirely on the universe's mood that day. And I chose instead to let Corwin Thatch sit in the dirt and wonder, forever, what exactly he just lost a fight to. Some choices you make for noble reasons. That one I made because it was extremely deeply, irreplaceably funny, and I have decided that's allowed. That night, the panel offered one final quiet line, smaller than the others, easy to miss if I hadn't already learned to read every inch of it like my life depended on it, which, increasingly, it seemed to. Comprehension, 19%. New passive unlocked, reputation drift. Others' belief in your strength may, in time, become real. I read that line 4 times. I did not understand it. I am not sure even now that I was supposed to. But I slept that night with a specific, dangerous contentment of a boy who had just discovered that being underestimated is not, in fact, the same thing as being weak, and who had not yet learned, because nobody had told him, and the panel certainly wasn't going to volunteer it, that there is a very large difference between becoming strong and merely being believed to be. I would learn that difference eventually. Just not yet. I would like to speak to whoever's writing these, I told the panel, with feeling. I want a formal review process. I want a complaints box. Arlo, my mother said, focus. I am focused, I told her. I am extremely focused on the fact that my 2 career options, as presented by the universe itself, are get head-butted by a goat for free, or get thrown across a training yard by an angry rich boy for coin. I would like a third option, I said. In fact, a fourth, fifth, and sixth. I would like a catalog. There was no catalog. There rarely is. I said yes, obviously, and I want you to understand that obviously was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Because there were several perfectly sensible reasons to say no. Corwin's face, the last time I'd seen it, had suggested a young man with several private fantasies about my future, none of them kind. But we needed the coin, badly. In the unglamorous way most families in Thistlebrook Hollow needed coin. And beneath the fear, in a part of myself I was only just starting to get acquainted with, I was curious. This, in retrospect, is either the bravest sentence I've ever thought or the stupidest, and I have made my peace with never fully resolving which. The first week at the Thatch estate went roughly as follows. Corwin hit me. I fell down. Sometimes I floated 4 inches above the ground first, which made falling down feel less like an injury and more like a uniquely undignified form of furniture. Corwin hit me again. I made a joke about it, usually involving whatever vegetable felt thematically appropriate that day. Corwin, increasingly, did not find this funny, which only encouraged me because making a boy with an epic rank affinity audibly grind his teeth has become one of my few reliable sources of joy. But something else was happening too. Underneath the bruises and the jokes, something the panel had apparently been quietly building toward the entire time. I had never seen a new tab before. The word archive, glowing where nothing had glowed before, felt less like a notification and more like discovering an extra room in a house I'd already decided I fully understood. I opened it. Radiant from Sasha Vale, Iron from Corwin Thatch, Frost from Pim Hadley, each one marked Mimicry Available. You're cataloging my friends, I said out loud in the middle of the training yard, which earned me a confused look from the stable hand and absolutely no explanation from the panel, because the panel never explains anything it doesn't feel like explaining. But I understood, looking at that list, what comprehension had quietly been building toward the whole time. Every affinity I witnessed I could keep. Not master, but keep. A small, faded copy, mine to call on, mine to grow. I had spent 2 weeks thinking I was the worst equipped boy in Thistlebrook Hollow. Standing in that yard, getting paid to be hit by a boy who hated me, I was starting to suspect I might actually be the only boy in the entire realm equipped for absolutely everything. Corwin hit me again. I floated, briefly, sideways, like a confused kite, the way I always did, and from somewhere underneath my own pain, I heard myself laugh. Do that again, I told him, grinning, bleeding slightly from the lip. I need the data. Corwin, to his enormous credit, looked genuinely disturbed by how happy I sounded. He did it again. I wanted on the record that I did, eventually, need a great deal of medical attention that month. I wanted on the record equally that I have never once regretted asking. Brindlewick holds a junior tournament every autumn, and I want to be extremely clear, before I tell you anything else about it, that I had no intention of entering it. None. Zero. I had achieved a stable, modest life as a professional bruise, and I was, by my own private standards, thriving. Then Corwin entered me. I found out the way I find out most things that ruin my week, publicly, with no warning, in front of people. Round 1, the announcer called. Corwin Thatch, Iron Duelist, Epic Rank, versus Arlo Penwick Hollow Rank. The crowd laughed, the comfortable, settled laugh of people who already believe they know exactly how the next 5 minutes are going to go. I turned to Corwin, standing beside me with the smug calm of a boy who has just set a trap. You entered me? I said. I entered my sparring partner, he said. Seemed only fair. You've gotten so much practice. Practice implies I know what I'm doing, I told him. I would describe the last month as more of an extended, mutual accident. Then this should be quick, he said. And right on cue, the panel decided this was the perfect moment to remind me that the audience was over 200 people and that I should try not to die in front of this many witnesses, because apparently that complicates the paperwork. There's paperwork, I said, mostly to myself, mostly in despair. My own power is making jokes at me now. Serious, I have been outpaced, comedically, by a glowing rectangle. The bell rang before I could finish spiraling, which, in retrospect, was probably for the best. Here's what the crowd saw. Corwin opened with a controlled flurry of iron light strikes, fast and precise, the kind of thing that takes years of training to make look effortless. And Arlo Penwick, that's me, moved through every single one of them like I already knew exactly where they were going to land, dodging with a loose, almost bored economy of motion. Until I caught Corwin's final strike on a forearm wrapped in faint, flickering gold light and turned the boy's own momentum right back into him. He hit the ground, for the second time in a month. Here's what I actually experienced. Pure, undiluted terror, converted at the very last possible second into action, because the panel had apparently decided this was the day to show its whole hand. Mid-fight, it informed me I had naming rights over the skill combination I just used, completely unprompted. I'm being asked to name things, I said out loud. I would like everyone to know I am currently dodging for my life and also doing paperwork. With a 3-second deadline ticking down and an actual boy on fire beside me, I panicked and shouted the only name that came to mind. The plot armor special. And the panel, completely deadpan, confirmed that its effectiveness was directly proportional to how badly I was panicking. Current panic level, exceptional. Performance, also exceptional. Corwin hit the ground a second time, and the crowd, which 30 seconds earlier had been laughing the comfortable laugh of people who already knew the ending, made a very different noise. The high, startled noise of an audience watching the ending rewrite itself live. I stood in the middle of the ring, chest heaving, one arm faintly glowing gold, completely unable to explain a single thing that had just happened, and said, to 200 strangers, the most honest sentence I have ever produced under pressure. I would also like to know what just occurred. The crowd, somehow, took this as confidence. I've learned since that the line between confidence and complete bewilderment shouted loudly enough is thinner than anyone would like to admit. I won the tournament not the way Corwin would have, with technique, with a single affinity sharpened over years into something elegant. I won it badly, loudly, stitched together out of other people's stolen light, and one terrible, panic-named skill. Sasha found me afterward, sitting on an overturned crate, holding ice against what was rapidly becoming the most impressive bruise of my career. Hollow rank, she said, sitting beside me. Tournament champion. I'd like that on my gravestone. Actually, I told her. Right under killed by a goat named Disaster. You're ridiculous, she said. I am extremely aware, I told her. You're also, she said more quietly, with an expression I hadn't seen from her before, the luckiest person I have ever met. I want that on the record, too. That night, the panel showed me my bond level had climbed to 41%, and a new status, locked, waiting at 50. I had absolutely no idea what was waiting for me there. I had every intention of finding out. Word of the tournament reached Thistlebrook Hollow roughly 4 hours before I did. By the time I limped back into town, ice bruised and triumphant, still faintly smelling of someone else's borrowed magic, the entire village had already rearranged its opinion of me twice and was working on a third draft. Old Hetty brought a pie to our door. I wanted to be clear that Old Hetty has never, in my recollection, brought anyone a pie for any reason. For the champion, she said, thrusting it at my mother like evidence in a trial. Tell him Disaster sends regards. Disaster, I said, accepting the pie with the gravity the moment deserved, can keep his regards. I have not forgiven Disaster. I will never forgive Disaster. Disaster owes me a roof's worth of dignity, and he knows it. Old Hetty left. The pie was excellent. I want that on the record, too, because not every good thing that happens to me needs to be complicated by a panel or a goat, and I intend to enjoy the rare exceptions. Corwin did not bring a pie. He showed up 3 days later, alone, without an audience, without a single prepared insult. So out of character that I genuinely checked the panel to see if it had a notification explaining what was happening to my life now. I want a rematch, Corwin said, to the ground, mostly. You've had several rematches, I told him. You keep losing them in increasingly creative ways. I'm starting to suspect you enjoy it. I don't enjoy it, he said, after a pause long enough that I started to feel almost bad for him. I've trained since I was 6. I have an epic rank. I have everything I was supposed to have, everything that's supposed to mean something. And I lost to a boy with nothing twice in front of everyone who matters to my father, and I need to understand how, or I'm going to lose my mind about it slowly for the rest of my life, like a splinter I can't find. I sat with that for a moment, because underneath the privilege and the mill money and the deeply punchable smugness, that was, recognizably, a real and human kind of pain. One I happen to know an enormous amount about from the other end. I can't teach you what I do, I said, honestly. Mostly because I don't know what I do. If I tried to explain my last fight in technical terms, the explanation would just be, I panicked correctly. That's not an answer, he said. It's the only one I've got, I told him. But I'll spar with you again. For free this time. No mill money, no audience. Just 2 boys hitting each other until one of us learns something useful. Why would you do that? He asked. Because, I said, meaning it entirely, you're the only person who's hit me enough times that I've started, against every instinct I have, to actually like you a little. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin both our reputations. He almost smiled. I want that on the record, because it happened so briefly and so reluctantly that I'm fairly sure he'd deny it under oath. You're telling me, I said, mostly to the ceiling that evening, that the secret to getting stronger has been making friends with the people trying to hurt me this entire time? The panel, as ever, declined to confirm or deny. The bond level crept up the way everything about the panel crept up. Slowly, then all at once, the way a kettle is silent for 10 minutes, and then suddenly, furiously, entirely a kettle. 46% came after a long, humiliating afternoon of Corwin genuinely teaching me the correct stance for absolutely anything, on the grounds that I couldn't keep winning by falling over in the right direction. 48% came after I used a clumsy, half-formed version of his own iron strike to stop a market stall from collapsing on a toddler, which earned me my first ever round of applause that had nothing to do with luck, fear, or a goat. 50% arrived on an entirely ordinary Tuesday while I was, of all things, peeling potatoes. I felt it before I saw it, a small, warm pulse behind my sternum, the same place the very first tug had come from, back at the spire. Back when I still thought the worst thing that could happen to me was a public word and 300 witnesses. The panel didn't flicker this time. It didn't make its usual harp string plink. It simply opened, fully, all at once, the way a door opens when you finally find the right key after weeks of trying every wrong one. I put down the potato. I want it on the record that I put down the potato very, very carefully. The way you set down anything when you suspect the next 10 seconds might rearrange your entire understanding of your own life. The new tab read Origin. System type inherited. Original bondholder redacted. Status of original bond dormant. Current bondholder Arlo Penwick. Please do not let that sentence keep you up at night, it added, which is, somehow, the least reassuring thing a glowing rectangle has ever said to me. Inherited from whom? I said out loud, to the empty kitchen. That's not an answer, I told it. That's a locked door with a sign on it. Accurate, the panel replied. Comprehension currently 51%. Required, significantly higher. Recommendation? Keep living. It helps, oddly. I laughed, a short, slightly unhinged laugh, the kind that comes out when your body isn't sure whether the situation calls for fear or delight and decides, against all logic, to split the difference. Because every single thing that had happened to me since the spire, the panel, the float, the goat, Sasha's light, Corwin's iron, the tournament, none of it had ever, not once, been mine to begin with. It belonged to someone else, someone who came before me, someone the panel wasn't ready to name, wrapped in a word, dormant, that was doing an enormous amount of quiet work to keep me from asking the one question that actually mattered, not what it was, where it had come from. But that night, I picked the potato back up, finished peeling it, and told the empty kitchen, well, whoever you were, I hope, wherever you ended up, that you think it was worth it. The panel didn't answer, but for just a moment, its light flickered a shade warmer, almost gold, like it was trying to say thank you. Then it was gone, and I was just a boy with a potato and significantly too many unanswered questions for a Tuesday.